Welcome to the Heart of Soul podcast, an exploration of who you are, what you are, and why you are, offering new ways to investigate age-old questions at the heart of you. Hi, it's Joseph, and thanks for listening to the Heart of Soul podcast. In today's episode, creation-relationality continued with the architecture of chakras, chakral breathing, how intuition works, and of course much more. It's a different take on the chakral system than you've likely heard before. I do hope you enjoy it. I remind you, as always, to please listen to this podcast from the beginning and in order. Thanks so much for listening. Well, welcome forward, everybody. This is episode 40. That's like almost half of 100. Yeah.
Wow. I have no response to that.
It's
40.
so fun. Well,
wow.
Stace was just saying before we started, a mutual friend of ours said that we were like the car talk of metaphysics, which I take as very high praise because I imagine that's still syndicated. That goes all the way back to when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers, I believe their name was or something. But those guys are entertaining and brilliant and informative. And if someone thinks that we're anywhere near like Click and Clack from Car Talk, I think that's great. One can only aspire to be that infotaining.
Infotaining. And
Yeah.
there we have a Josephicism.
I didn't invent the word infotainment, but not many people will then go on to conjugate it in different ways and experience the full range of endings.
Made up word.
Infotainimation, tantamountness, I don't know. So we're going to continue our foray into creation relationality today and talk about some chakra stuff as well. And I was saying to Stace, I've been experimenting with, I believe what he said last time, to be breathing, the breathing thing we talked about last time. And I am here to provide a testimonial. It absolutely worked. So good. I couldn't do it for longer than about 5 minutes at a time. But where should we start today?
Well, let's... We sort of dropped a bomb in some ways last time about there only being 6 chakral structures, with 1 and 7 being the one themed chakra system, just like there's themes associated with 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 1 and 7 has a theme of holy wholeness. And that's a 6th chakra. And so it has that. If there's 6 chakral structures, then there's with colorful pinwheels at the end of each end. Then we've got, of course, 12 chakral pinwheels, and that structure makes it a lot easier in one way, or it takes a whole different tack on self-healing modalities by utilizing this plumbing system. If we can use it, pranic plumbing is a good moniker for it, because with the 2, 4, and 6 being innies, in other words, coming into you at the front of you and into the back of you, those innies can be linked to an inhale part of the breath. And 1, 3, 5, and 7, those chakral structures are all yogic, moving away from the body, from the front and the back. And those can be the exhale, an exhale dynamic that can be linked to the breath. When you start using, in other words, Identity offers a general title of Avraprana for chakral body, third eye type of activity. And in Avaprana, an Avapranist can help people magnify, certify, and codify specific things going on in their world across the hood board. In other words, personhood, sagehood, or sainthood. But in this case, Joseph had a great asked me a question about how he could quicken or ameliorate, depending on what mood he is in any
Yeah.
day. He's standing on the precipice of pre-dual / non-dual awakening, and it's crazy making, because in these days, awakening to the pre-dual non-dual is governed by a yin dynamic, and it goes in slow motion for most people. And that slow motion can create, for someone like Joseph, who tracks minutia, pranic minutia, can create consciousness of strange and irritating kinds of disabilities.
Strange and irritating disabilities. Yes.
So
Strange and irritating really aptly describes a lot of my experience of human existence recently. Yeah, that's strange and irritating. Oh.
Okay, so let's just use Joseph as our first example
Sure.
of how avrapranically, avrapranas can guide someone, whether it's a personhood, sagehood, or sainthood domain, to the next level, past the envelope that they're going through at the moment, pushing the envelope, whatever stage that is. There's some chakral. You can utilize the chakral pranic plumbing system, which I'll describe a little more here in a moment, to help you to the next stage of anything you're going through, which we've not had that kind of elemental usage of the chakral system, because we haven't had a really emotive-based paradigm looking at it.
I feel like I feel a little guilty for bringing us back into sagehood a lot, because that's what's going on a lot for me. But here's a follow-up question on the now thing we talked about. I think this was last time. Yeah, last time. Sainthood versus sagehood now. I'm having the experience, and I've had this a few times when we start doing a podcast, of that, like right now we're talking and we're recording this podcast, and in some way in my perception of reality, this isn't actually happening. That's the experience. Like this isn't happening. This isn't real. How does that make sense relative to ennowment? Because if there's this feeling that this isn't happening and this isn't real, wouldn't that mean I'm not in the now?
Yes.
Okay, so
because you're still abstracting.
Aha.
See?
I'm seeing the abstraction mechanism.
Exactly. You're not being it yet. When you're being in the now, you don't track you're in the now.
Okay.
And the now is an absence of something, not a presence of something, is a better way to say it.
So it's sense? That I've been in and out of the now is causing me to experience a sort of surreal disorientation when I'm not in the now, because now I have an anchor point for what being in the now is.
Exactly right. Oh, that was so few words, so much meaning there. Exactly right. That's why
strange and irritating.
Strange and irritating. That's why it feels unreal, because you've got an offset that you're conscious of that is not in the now, and making it feel like this isn't real, just like you said. Isn't that interesting?
And now it feels realer just having said that.
Yeah. Yeah. And people think, especially with E.T.'s book, Power of Now, we inadvertently and unconsciously revert to the now as a noun. But if it's a noun, right? The power
the now
of
is
now.
A noun. Wow, what a great that's so not how it is. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's not a noun. It is a and I'll sometimes I'll use the word transcendental without choking too badly, but it's a transcendental bandwidth that is more an absence of a noun than it is a presence of a noun. We can nounize it colloquially if we want to talk about it, but it's not what it is. Isn't that the challenge with language, Joseph?
Yeah.
We can to make something real enough to talk about, we have to edgify it with labels, when the thing that we're describing doesn't have edginess to it.
And so we risk distorting it.
Exactly right. So the now is much more of an absent thing. You can't track it while you're trying to track it.
So here's what I think was going on, because
Uh-huh.
sort of feel into that, and that shift is happening, having named it. What I feel is it's putting me more in this feeling of that I'm falling forward into my experience of life, and that
Yes.
starts to feel out of control. And I think that's the very thing that was keeping me out of the now. Of like, the now is this infinite falling feeling for some part of me that it wanted to
Yes.
not do. And then when that part of me tries to contract from that, well, then I feel
Yes.
disoriented and everything doesn't feel real. So it's like they
Oh,
both are bad feeling. Just one is good and the other is not.
even though they both feel bad.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to a pretty good headline in Identity for those that are out there that good and bad can apply to both feeling good and feeling bad.
Yes, that's
So,
why, though, I said to Stace, and I'll say it again here, the last episode I titled "The Necessary Descent into Personal Hell,"
yeah.
and so there are many different facets of that gem. And here's another one.
Well, one more comment about what you just said about falling forward. Um, we're conditioned to feel from in the front of us a substantive world,
Oh
right?
God.
A substantive world. And when the now starts slipping in, it literally voids the substantive world. So you feel like you're falling forward into an empty. See, because
Uh-huh.
the substance
Like the floor falling out from under you, except it's a
the
wall
front.
in front of you. It's the loss of the nounification of things.
Exactly right.
Mm.
So the loss of the nounification of things
Noun.
puts us in contact with the non-substantiality of the now, which is space and time, space and time. And we'll create that falling forward feeling because it's an absence now carved out of the substantiveness of the world in front of us, full of light and dualism and experiential energy and all that stuff.
Mm.
So, yeah, we can decode pretty much um, most of the items of the human condition one way or the other.
Yeah.
So,
It's been my experience. Yeah.
so Joseph is in the slow motion track of pre-dualizing, non-dualizing awakening, and because he's so perceptive and articulate with etheric energies, uh, he is going through this in slow motion, as we say. So I gave him a little assignment, and I'd like to decode what it was and why, going right back forward to the chakral system.
And
His
we did do that on air last time, I think, but it probably stands to be reviewed.
oh, did we? Oh, I
I think
forgot.
so. Yeah. But anyway,
Well,
I'm sure people want to
yeah,
hear it
it was.
again.
Let's just real quick.
Yeah.
It was about asking Joseph to see what happens when he breathes in the fourth chakra, middle of the chest, from front and back as best he can. A lot of times you can practice by breathing in through the front one and then breathing through the back one separately until you can get them both at the same time. It's just a matter of practice. It's actually not as hard as you might think.
Mm-hmm.
Breathing in four, yinically, because it's an ini yin chakra structure. Breathing out five, which is front and back of the throat. Breathing in six, front and back, and out seven and one, top and bottom. And what he did, we talked about before starting today, the difference between just breathing in six and out one and six front and back and one and seven and starting with the heart chakra.
Yeah, what I experienced very quickly was I started doing the in six and then out one and seven, and just after, I don't know, maybe not even a minute, I started out by trying to do both and alternating, but it was just a lot for my mind to track. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just do the 6 one and revisit the 4 one later. And I found in like 30 seconds, it was just, I felt that I was transcending. I was starting to kind of leave my body. And then I remembered why you said to do the 4 one. And I was like, oh, this is important because you have to do both, or otherwise I'll be disappearing out the top of my 7th chakra, which is what an emotive wound-based part of me wants to do. So,
Yes.
and I'm glad it was uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
So I went back to alternating 4 and 6.
So there's some breath work linked to chakral structures, which had to be redefined, in my opinion, to be able to really maximize this possibility of linking the breath. Because when our attention is focused on the breath, and then we link that attentive focus on the breath and link it to the way the chakras are already inflowing and outflowing, you can do a whole host of things that help ensoulment. I'd like to just to give a quick overview of the whole system of why that works that way. There's 5 basic. We'll only talk about. Let's just talk about the front and back and top and bottom right now. But the rear of us is where is best with quotation marks around it is the soul domain. And in front of us, if you did a sagittal cut through the top of the head, which is, most people know what a sagittal cut is, front and
No,
half.
wait, most people definitely don't know what sagittal is.
Okay. A sagittal cut is, imagine not a guillotine, another dimension where it goes, a big blade or saw goes through the top of your head, front to back, so it separates you front and back in half that way.
Yeah.
A sagittal cut, the rear is our soul domain, and the front is our human domain. All of our human activity is we face into it. That's the way divine being unfolded, I guess. So when you have chakras ready-made, communicating between the front and the back, yinically and yangically, inwardly and outwardly, you've got a communication system between the soul and the human, right there to be utilized. But you first need to be educated on that system existing in that way in the first place. So when we breathe in 4, let's just go through it here pretty quickly. When we breathe in 4, which is a yin ini chakra, from front and back, from the front, it goes in the front of 4, through the central canal, and passes human information to our soul.
Mm.
When we breathe out through 5 let's back up. I don't want to get confusing. It not only proceeds horizontally and imparts human information to the soul, it also, bits of it, a percentage of it goes out 1 and 7 as it passes through, which informs divine being and Mother Earth of our experience in the human. You track that?
Mm-hmm.
In 4 and in the back of 4, the ini from the back is the soul talking to us. The ini from the front is the human talking to the soul, and they meet in the middle and goes top and bottom, and the information goes to divine being meta context. See, soul is context, human is content, front and back and front, and divine being 1 and 7, holy wholeness, is a meta context. In other words, you can use chakral breathing to hyper intensify information communication between soul, human, and divinity. And that's exactly what the pranic plumbing system looks like. If you look at it from the side, you'd see these 2, 3, 4, and 5, these horizontal canals. You'll see the and 6, and then you'll see the vertical canal. And if you see it that way, it's almost like our etheric skeleton. It's a through which the inside of the bones or the channels is not bone marrow, of course. It's prana. These are tubes. So you've got this informational interchange going through at all times, indexed vertically by divine being and earth being one one domain, as we said last time. And the rest of the information, think of it, our two going in from the front is sending information to the central canal about our sexuality and our creativity. And then that gets registered, goes right, and also in from the back. The soul is adding its experience in the past or in the present of sexuality and creativity, different than the human version.
So this is like the plumbing architecture of ensoulment. It's the paths through which ensoulment actually happens.
It's a beautiful way of putting it. And to have this at our fingertips is extraordinarily helpful in helping us quicken our ensoulment by, unfortunately, also counter-illuminating resistances. In other words, if you start breathing in two from the front and the back, breathing in from the back, the soul is going to have information for you for how soul does sex or creativity. And if you're breathing in from the front of two, you're going to have your human experience talking. That gets shot up the elevator to 7 and up to 7 and down to 1, to same domain, only two different poles. And what you're going to do is, by sending it that way, you're going to enhance divine being's guidance to talk to you about.
Because where it dissonates, it's going to sort of light up in your experience. You're going to, where the soul and the local personality are at odds, you're going to feel that.
Exactly. Breathing in from front and back, and then shooting it up and down in 1 and 7 uploads our creative sexual dynamic that we're, whatever bandwidth in or frequency where it's happening now, right to divine being. And the divine being will, through the earth, through the front end, activate your heart chakra to start to digest its guidance. I know I'm being a little obtuse here, but I'm touching different bases here to try to get across this complex but actually pretty simple system, and why breathing in certain scenarios, Joseph you might be able to come up with a couple of roadblocks in any three of the hoods.
I have an example right now that just hit me. I was feeling the back of 4 versus the front of 4, and the first thing that hit me is that the back of 4 doesn't like how closed the front of 4 is. There's a dissonance there. The back of 4 is like, why aren't you caring more, is sort of the words I would put it. It's like, why aren't you risking caring more? And there's like two different points of view there. And the front of 4, I can feel the fear there that is the answer to that.
Sure. And as a little add-on to that, perfectly described there, and exactly what we're trying to say here, which, again, I apologize for some of the obtuosity to it.
Well, we're the car talk of metaphysics, so we get to do that now.
Oh, that's right. How many people are technically familiar with the workings of an automobile, why it all works?
Hey, that was a famous NPR show. If it can be if that can be well received, then so can this be.
Sure. For yin beings, let's just do a little sidebar on that one. On 4, Joseph, especially yin-based beings in this lifetime, women, or a male who's got a lot of yin in his 1/3 yin. What can happen here is that when we can either underdo closeness and vulnerability in 4, or merge too much in relationality with 4. When we're merging with 4, what we're doing is selling out 3, our personal power. You see, it's overshadowing our personal power. Someone who is a rabidly codependent. I can't live without you. If I stop seeing you, I will die, to exaggerate. Has a far too wound-based 4th chakra, and a completely wound-based, undervalued 3 chakra, which is the center of personal power. Well, the
Which,
reason we have
by
it,
the way, is what we're taught it should feel like when we're falling in love. Let's just insert that there. We
yes.
just recast like, a couple thousand years of conditioning about falling in
Thank
love
you.
and how that's supposed to be in one
Yeah,
sentence.
I forget what world I'm talking with sometimes.
That's why I'm here.
Thank, thank you, Joseph. Thanks. So, in other words, what chakral breathing can do, along with Dharma and either sage, saint, or personhood, depending on the domain, what it can do is illuminate these kinds of deficits where the ideal would be our personal power is strong, and which is a yogic self dynamic, and four is a closeness and vulnerability chakra. They're supposed to be balanced so that you don't merge too much with your partner or block too far from people or the world, or you don't overdo three because you're blocked in four. So you can, all these kinds of things get illuminated to an avapranist when they look at your field or ask you to breathe through certain chakras and then report what you sense, which is what you just did there. So in that sense, what an avapranist might say is, okay, what's your name? Oh, Joseph. Yes, Joseph. There's a couple of possibilities here. I see there's a lot of aeration going on through seven, and you've got in fact, it's aerating seven so much you're not conscious of how much six information is going in because it's drafting. Once you fully awaken, and you'll be able to perceive how much your third eye is acutely tuned into everything, which is a little blurry right now.
Whoa, so you're saying that part of the transcendence motive in me is to not actually realize how much I'm taking in six.
Yes.
Yeah, that feels true.
And the thing about it is, you think, well, why is a partial opening in seven, let's say, as Joseph has at the moment, and that's reasonable for where he's at. Why is that problematic? Why wouldn't a fully open one disorient you? It's the same principle. It's all physics. This is just etheric physics. When there's a lot of wind outside and you have an open window just a little, you're going to have a rush of air. You're going to have a whistling. You've got dissonant energies here as the pressure outside and the pressure inside whistle through with a lot of turbulence. Whereas if you open the windows all the way and the pressure inside the room and outside the room equalizes, you don't get much flow or much dissonance. They equalize and balance out, which is why they tell you to open windows during a tornado.
Yeah, right.
Open all the windows. So there's not such a big difference in outside low pressure and inside high pressure to blow out your walls.
But what's so cool about that metaphor is in both cases, our protection mechanisms, that's the last thing they want to do. Yes. Oh, there's a tornado outside. Close all the windows so it doesn't get in. We do that on an emotional level too. Like, oh no, this thing is coming to get me. I need to keep it out. Like,
yeah, exactly. So that's why a partially open seven for Joseph will dull his conscious tracking of how much information is going in six, which, as he so humbly said, his protection doesn't want him to know, because he had to stop that information in some way, if he could, just to survive and learn to be a human being. Joseph's third eye is every bit as developed as his beloved's, who's off the charts on her third eye accessing.
Yeah, so I was afraid of that.
Yeah.
Part of me was afraid of that. I've been thinking about that very thing recently. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know this is a little hard to describe in words first time through, and a lot of it needs examples to really drive it home. But the headline here is, seeing this chakral pranic plumbing system in this way opens up a whole domain of chakral doctoring, where self-healing, and if you have an avapranist at hand that you can consult with, who can see the flows and what's going on, link it to the experiences that certain test breathings do in an avaprani, let's say, then things can be diagnosed much more quickly and definitively, and steps taken to treat whatever is going on. So again, I'd love to be able to flash a graphic here of this, but if you can imagine, second chakra, all the yin chakras are inhale, metaphors for inhaling, and all the yogic are for exhaling, which means the first, you have to have an inhale before you can ever exhale, right? And then you need an exhale in order to make room for the next inhale. But sequentially, you need an inhale to get the whole thing started. You can't inhale, you'll exhale yourself and you'll just die. So inhale is the more primary, which is why it's a yin dynamic. It's inward breathing. So when you in breathe, you are yinically relating to life. Then you breathe out. Let's say breathe in 2, breathe out 3, breathe in 4, breathe out 5, breathe in 6, breathe out 1 and 7. In other words, 1 and 7 go last. The first chakra that is inhaling in that sense is 2. Now, I would have called 2 1 because it's the primary place that we inhale pranic energy from our front-facing life. Is through 2. It's the first one. It sets all the others in motion, even though you can breathe separately between all of them. But I would call, since 1 and 7 are one dynamic, I would have called the second chakra 1, the third chakra 2, which is just different nomenclature, but it's the same reality, just different frame. So the whole point of all this is, look what we get when we drop that bomb, Joseph, last podcast, about 1 and 7 being one spirit domain with just differing density poles, instead of 2 separate worlds that we were all taught for the last 1,000 or 2,000 years. A mundane world and a supernatural world, or a mundane world and a non-dual world, not world. Either one of those. They're fundamentally different, but they're not. And they're all part of one spirit domain, because nothing can be outside of God.
Yeah, I still having waves of insights about that, like the significance of how we've, personhood paradigms work on being human and being here, and spiritual paradigms work on the spirit domain. But if structurally the 1 and 7, what we're calling the 6th chakra, are actually one system, then it means architecturally those can't be separated ever.
Yes.
That's just enormously significant.
It is, and it was hiding in plain sight. You know, even for me. I mean, I operated and have been doing Avaprana with people very effectively with the old system in some way, because you can learn how to work with the spins of the chakras to actuate growth and help healing, and sometimes get rid of entities that have attached to certain wounds in us and get them out of the field.
And for a random oblique validation of that, I told you this already, but I think it would be fun. My girlfriend, who generally likes her name not to be named on this podcast, but she, as Stace recently said, has an enormous third eye. And when I said after that podcast, I said, boys, as we recorded it, boy, Stace dropped a bomb today, that there are only 6 chakras. And I just sort of watched her to see what she did with it, and didn't tell her anything else. And she said, she sort of didn't really even skip a beat. She's like, oh, you mean 1 and 7? And I said, go on. She's like, well, they're the same. And I actually pulled out my phone and recorded what she said, because I wanted to hear what her take on that was and capture that. And she basically said, at least 50% or more of what you said. And she didn't seem to take in the significance of it. And I said,
right, that's fine.
And I said, well, like what? I mean, I didn't even know what to ask. Like, how did you get this? She's like, well, that's how it's always looked to me, but nobody ever talks about it that way. So I just didn't say anything. Like, wow, is there acreages of information in that statement, right?
Oh my God. I'm I just turned 71 in October, and it took me all this time to notice that had blockages in my personal that didn't allow me to see it. And once that happens, I saw it. But here, she's been seeing it her whole life, and she's a lot younger than me. So there's the power not only of yin, but the power of her gift is. And a gift that large, I've met not many, but several people with a gift that large. And it really is just as much a disability and a nightmare as it is a superpower that you would want to acquire. It's a disability. It makes it very hard to be centered in your human or centered in your soul when you're overwhelmed moment to moment with a flood of information that goes inward in six. So when someone wants to bet on a World Cup, who's going to win in the World Cup, you might think a psychic shoots a beam out of six to read out the system and see if he can see ahead in time. That's not how it works. A lot of third eye people don't really get that it's a yin chakra, and they're receiving information that they then have to collate if they become conscious of it and try to focus. You can't reach out with six chakra. You have to let go and let it come in, and then you'll get impressions. It's like imagine the inside of your head is clay, and you're in a sandstorm, and there's a hole in your forehead, and the particles of sand are going in six and interacting and embedding themselves in the clay inside your head. That's exactly how third eye information goes in. Kernels of information connect to our logical brain mind for us to collate and then figure how can I translate this impression that I'm getting right now. And most of the time it comes in clairsentience, which I'll talk about next here. Clairsentience, feeling things that are not in your present visual or experiential world. So I think that's without a graphic. That's as much as I want to say because it can be confusing about the flows and the structures and stuff without a graphic. But I'd like to talk about third eye a little more now, because the whole end of creation relational dharma and experience is picking up spiritual realities in the human theater, right? In our dense human theater, we are already in spirit, but third eye allows communication in different modalities with the information that's invisible and non-experiential to our six senses. I think we have six senses, by the way, where thought is the sixth sense.
Well, here's this. Yeah, I've always loved that. But here's a sidebar. If you use the chakras as sense organs,
yes,
aren't there more like being turned on sexually? That's a sense, isn't it?
Yes. Sure.
And intuition is a sense.
Yes.
That's 7 and 8. The heart senses. It senses emotion. That's a sense.
Absolutely.
Right? So
sure.
There's a sense for every chakra, it seems to me.
It is related to the theme, characterized and colored by the theme of the chakra. So yeah, you could say we have six chakral senses in addition to the six senses of
the local personality senses.
Yeah,
human
exactly
senses.
right.
Oh, soul senses versus human senses, maybe.
There you go. Cool. That's wonderful. Nice connection there. See, I can put out the raw stuff, and then Joseph translates it so we can all understand it, including me.
Including
me. I'll get downloads like this, and I'll spew out raw material, and Joseph will smelt it right away as it comes out and shapes it. like a refinery. Joseph's a walking informational refinery that smelts my raw information into applicable rubber meets the road dynamics. So, yeah.
Well, thanks.
Senses.
I'm happy to be smelting.
Yes. So the third eye is and fourth and sixth. Let's talk about those for a moment because they're very similar. They're both yin chakras, and they're only separated by our willfulness in 5. 3 is our seat of personal power for identity. And 5, its next consequent yogic chakra, is the use of our personal power through will. So if a person has issues with their thyroid or their vocal cords that are sort of inborn, or they get diseases there, they're underwilling. Their will is either, well, it could be either overused or underused to create dissonance for thyroid cancer or these things. These are all contributions. But the point I want to make here is that 4 and 6 are both yin, and heart sense sometimes has very similar bandwidths and frequencies as third eye sensibilities. So heart sense is more in the present, and the not the now. That's another distinction here. It's present stuff the heart will feel. And when you're sensing, oh, I think my friend Joseph is eating oatmeal right now, which sometimes I get what people are eating sometimes. That would be a
you can't
third
control
eye.
what information comes in. Yeah.
No, I can't.
I
You
often
can't.
foresee what bills I'm going to receive in my mailbox for some reason. I'll just see it like, okay, thanks, the
Right.
divine, for showing me what I'm getting in the mail today. Like,
Yes. So the distinction here is what the heart receives information that's in your present world and present location. If it goes into another location or out of the right present right now, because the now describes the present too. That's a small n now. It's a heart. It's a fourth chakra dynamic. If it's not local in time or space, then it will be a sixth chakra dynamic. So someone who has been opened up in personhood, Joseph, which is reducing ever more thinly the block over fourth chakra that we all are engineered to have, because we didn't get heart food sufficiently in childhood from any parenting, any styles of parenting, even with parents who did the best they could do, were underfed. Because unless a parent, as we said in earlier podcasts, has created an emotional, spiritually mature heart, they don't know they don't have the milk to feed children. Not milk, it's bad metaphor. Cow milk for kids. What is this?
yeah.
So by that, in that sense, if a person has ensouled their personal being to some degree, and has sixth chakra gifts, they can be overwhelmed by feelings, by impressions that make it hard to cognate, collate, and comprehend moment to moment what's going on in their world. Which since 2012, many people, especially women, have been disabled. It's like their cognitive dynamics are being unplugged in slow motion, or sometimes abruptly for people. And they have an event for women, especially because 2 and 4 are being supported in all of us in this yin aegis now. And in that sense, if you're already sensitive in 4 and you already have gifts in 6, the yin dynamic that raises all yin boats is going to have a larger effect in disabling some of our yogic accommodative realities of life, and make you not able to think clearly, and brain fog. And brain fog is not just created by long COVID or anything else organic. It's caused by, in the present day, sensitive people in 4 and gifted people in 6 who happen to have both those arrays in that way, are really struggling, trying to maintain a positive, logical, grounded kind of life. It's just very difficult for people in 4th chakra and 6th chakra gifts.
Yeah, I said before we went on air, I said it's like what was happening for me these days feels like walking a tightrope while drinking alcohol. It's like it's already difficult. Why am I getting drunk? Why am I getting drunker and making it harder? But
yeah. So, in that sense, if you happen to have a difficulty with cognitivity in the last couple of years, please know that you might be a sensitive, both in 4 and 6, get with 4 and 6 gifts, and there's nothing wrong with you. It's what's right about you that's disabling you, which is a hard thing to deal with when what's disabling you is right, is correct for you, is applicable to you, right? So, in that way, when we, last point about the chakras, and we'll come back up for a moment here. I want to finish something with chakras I just thought of. A good avapranist has gifts in 4 and 6, and they can read out and feel with two different frequencies, but similar. They coordinate. They're resonant. They can see things and feel things in a person sitting in front of them, and able to diagnose with 4 and 6, a combination of 4 and 6, not just 6, what's going on with chakral situations with the person, that would explain the symptoms the person who's come in to see the avapranist to look at in the first place. So the report of symptoms, the avapranist looks through, gets impressions, receives impressions through 4 and 6, and then can make that diagnosis. But creation relational, another way to ground it. Let's do a grounded version that has nothing to do with third eye, and that is the ass meditation. Remember the ass meditation?
Ass meditation, of course. Yes.
Yes. What it is, it's an activation in some way, or a clearing, or a usage of the 1-7 chakral canal system. What happens is you sit with your butt flat on the ground as best as you can. Can't use a meditation bench. Got to sit flat on the ground, and you start to feel, because you can track. You can start to track how 1 goes into the earth in the same way 7 goes into the heavens, so to speak. And if you track the way your first chakra you penetrate, let's say, the earth, the floor that you're, the root chakra, penetrates the floor. Now you start feeling, and you can flash on your mind to okay, here's a picture and there's a feeling. Here's a picture, there's a feeling. Underneath the floor is an airspace. Okay, so now I'm connecting to the airspace, and then I'm connecting below the airspace between the artificial floor and the foundation. Okay, now I'm feeling the foundation, and then I'm starting to go through the foundation. I'm feeling the raw earth underneath the foundation. And now, once you hit to the raw earth under the foundation, you can go lateral in 360 degrees, whatever point of the compass or micro point of the compass you want to go, and expand and feel the whole earth. Feel the whole earth sitting on your butt. It can expand outward. That's when third can get in the game and actually give you a sensory reality of the universality and the oneness of everything, and how it's glued together with spirit. So there's a case of using 1 to help ground and connect to the universality of how nothing is disconnected. Even air connects us. There's air connecting you to the wall behind you, right? And you can go in any direction in a spherical. Now we go from a 360 to a spherical, and any point, any radii in that radius in that sphere, you can connect to everything in that way consciously, and not just define yourself by the edges of your skin and your history in your memory. There's a whole other world that's operating all the time off the table of our consciousness that we can train ourselves to become conscious of using chakral energies. Mm-hmm. So there's another case where the body can get into the game, the physical body, because next thing I want to talk about is chakral bodies, which is a different, a different cut through the pie of our soulful being. Associated with each one of our, what we call the 12 holes, or spinning pinwheels, let's say, that prana is either going in and out of. there you have an associated chakral body that is coming out about five, or let's do it in order. A second chakral body, you have a second chakral body that coordinates with the second chakra that goes about 5 to 6 inches out of your physical body. One is your physical body, is the first chakral body. The second chakral body is an etheric body, one step less dense, and it's about 5 or 6 inches away. Then the third chakra has a third chakral body associated with it, another 5 or 6 inches. And this goes on and on and on until we get to the seventh chakral body that is operating on a single axle. If you think of it that way, it's rotating like a tire in a horizontal domain through the axle of the 1 and 7. And all of these are interacting with each other, and we can see, avapranists can see blockages and cloggings and dissonances in the chakral bodies that correspond to what's going on. For example, if someone has splenic problems, which not many people do, it may be an injury to the spleen and it can't heal, you could not only look at the third chakral canal system, which goes horizontally, you can look at the third chakral body and see if there's something in the chakral body that needs to be massaged through or rubbed out or lifted out, just like chiropractors and massage therapists do when they rub out contractions in your musculature or your tendons.
And
so
these chakra bodies is what most paradigms would call auras, right? That's what people are seeing.
Well, that's what they can sense. Yeah, what we see. Yes, thanks. The chakral bodies, and they're glowing with the same colors as we associate with the chakras, faint colors. But you see a rainbow thing around the head and shoulders of people, the aura, or sometimes a little lower in the body. Those are the chakral bodies glowing. So it's a different dynamic, but another whole domain of our soulfulness that an avapranist can utilize to try to help folks with emoto-energetic, emoto-spiritual issues.
And also that these chakra bodies are aspects of the soul, because the body is inside the soul. So when people say, talk about someone's aura, which we would say someone's chakra body, that's not something the body is putting out. Right. It's something the soul is putting out. It's a precipitate of the soul, just like the body is. It's all soul.
Yeah, exactly, just different densities.
And this is why I often thought this is why we have a sense of personal space when someone is too close. They're standing in your soul.
Yes, exactly right. The soul, the body is in the soul. The soul's not inside the body. So you're exactly right. These are just segments with different qualities, density factors, and colors. You could say the chakra bodies is the soul, and the soul can go out, let's see, there's 5 or 6 of them, 25 inches or so above your head, below your feet. It goes through the floor and the ceiling if you're in a low ceiling thing. That's the soul cocoon that we're walking in all the time. Where the body that we identify as in ourselves is just the chakral 1 body.
I imagine this is why a standard ceiling is 8 feet, I think, and it's probably because any lower and we feel it, right? We don't like that.
Yeah, exactly right. Mm-hmm. I happen to be. I realized why I've been claustrophobic most of my life is because.
You need more than 8 feet.
Most of the time, even though I'm short, I'm only 5'8", just a bit more than the cruise boy, Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
But I've always been claustrophobic, and I have to have a lot of room above my head and around my body, and that's why the widths, this 5 or 6 inches is the average. Some people have a foot of segmentation of the other bodies. And their soul is usually because they've lived so bloody long, had so many lifetimes, they've accumulated so much life data, their soul expands with experience, and so older souls tend to get fatter in soul, you could say. So
That's
Yeah.
why
So
younger
you're,
souls, it's that you see younger souls tend to be more attracted to collectivistic paradigms. And they're like, you see like 8 people stuffed in a car, and like they don't
oh
seem to
yeah,
mind that. They seem to even enjoy it. I can't even imagine that kind of thing. It
sure.
makes me claustrophobic immediately.
Yeah. So younger souls, collectivism in all forms. Only younger souls buy into collectivistic philosophies
Hmm.
that where the group's needs are more important than the individuals.
Yeah,
That's
they
something to
find it
grow up.
cozy, not
Yes,
claustrophobic. Hmm.
exactly right. We all have to grow out of that stage. But one day, one lifetime, so that we now start prioritizing, start pivoting on the other end. Healthy, mature, emotionally mature self-interest is more important than group interest that we grow in. Eventually, you've got to have both equal, not one more than the other. Collectivism denigrates the individual, and narcissism denigrates the group.
Mm.
You've got to find eventually when you heal, then we've got it's serve ourselves and others equally and lovingly. That's our goal. That's the goal. But so depending on which younger souls tend to be collectivistic and less individualistic. Middle-aged souls tend to be narcissistic, individualistic, and older souls are heartfully. There's no word for a collectivistic and narcissistic medium except
Selfist was the word you used
selfist.
to
Oh
use.
yes, an old term from the old days. Selfist, not selfish. Emotively mature self orientation is selfist, whereas as opposed to selfish. So
Another paradigm, by the way, somebody told me use that word. Some other teacher in the world is using the word selfist.
yeah, well, Bree Bree found recently the first shock roll graphic that showed yin and yang flows, copyrighted in 2014.
Mm.
Uh, uh, my information stuff started to go out in the early 90s when the internet was just unfolding. And so we found many examples where phrases were lifted right out of some of my earlier websites. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that in one sense because part of the job here is to bring a paradigm and get it go out into the world. And so if people want to steal and make it their own without acknowledging the source that they got that from, that's between them and karma.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm not so bothered by being, I used to be, but not anymore. I'm heartened by the fact that people have copied some of the phraseology and terms out there that were not out there before the 90s, early 90s. So I'm heartened by that. Oh, I'm doing some good, even though if Bree and I are in some ways just surviving, living in a little small cottage by the grace of divine being with a landlord who gave us half off on
On
our
that
rent.
subject, you were the first person I heard, or your paradigm was the first venue in which I heard the term "feel into." I'm going to feel into this, and now I hear that pretty often. People
Mm-hmm.
say that, and so I don't know if that was a term you necessarily coined or whether it was independently arising in different places, which sometimes happen. But I find it
Sure.
very interesting that some of those
Yeah.
terms sort of become part of the vernacular.
Yeah, the common in this country, anyway, in my experience, was in the 60s and 70s, coming from. I'm coming from this.
Yeah.
I'm coming from that. It always seemed backwards to me. It seems split. Feel into, not come from, is a whole
Uh-huh.
other orientation. See, but one last point on that is I actually found a woman who took literally 75 to 80% verbatim items from my old website, the old 1.0,
Mm-hmm.
and put her name on it
Ooh.
uh, without acknowledging the source. In those days, I was a little more bothered by it than I am now, which is almost not at all. It's a compliment in some ways to me. but that's different for them. This them and their karma. They and their karma are going to have to deal with it. Anyway, I contacted her and said, "This is Daniel Stace Barron, and I'm just calling you because you have obviously. I was very nice. You've obviously wholesale taken material off my website without attribution." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, there's some sort of integrity issue here. There was copyrights on the website for many of the pages, not all of them. There's a legal issue involved, but I don't really care about that. I'm glad that you did that in one way, but without attribution, aren't you bothered by not attributing all this information that came out of you instead of someone else?" And she didn't miss a beat. She said, "No, of course not. I'm not bothered because all knowledge is universal. All knowledge is universal and for everyone." And I said something like,
"That's what we call a truth in service, by the way. That's a term we don't use very often here, but it's abundant."
But I got her to burp because I said, "Oh, really? Boy, that's an interesting idea. I can see why you say that." So
in my room, sorry. I knew it was going to go toward me because I'm afraid of them.
Okay.
Go on. Sorry.
So why do you have your name on that information then, if it's all universal?
Nice.
Oh, she missed a beat and said, "Well, I just want to be something like I don't remember exactly. I want to be a fountain of information so people can ask me questions about this material." And
that
so
was
you
a
would
brilliant counter there. Why is it your name?
Yeah. Why have you put your personal name imprint on it then?
If we're all one, then it might as well have your name on it. It doesn't really make a difference whether it's her name or your name, right? It wouldn't really matter.
Exactly. So bottom line is she hung up on me pretty quick after that, if I remember right. Yeah, that's a big wasp. I can even see it through Zoom there.
There's a wasp in my room. And I'm just going to have to be afraid, and we'll finish this.
Do you want to? We can pick up again if you want to catch it, and we stop and start again.
Yeah, let's pause it here, and
we want Joseph at the top of his game here.
Yeah.
Wasps are nasty, especially in Maui.
Yeah. So hold on, I'll get a jar.
Okay. We were talking about universal knowledge.
Right. So
we're back. Let's go forward to the next little topic here, a subtopic, and that is the 5 kinds of abilities we have good words for that describe 5 dimensions of third eye activity. There's clairvoyance, which most people know. You see things, literally you see things that other people can't see, or you can't see with your physical eyes, clairvoyance. Clairaudience, which is hearing things that other people can't hear. Clairsentience, which is feeling things that are sensing things that you can't see clairvoyantly or hear clairaudiently, but you sense, I sense a presence in the room, right? Then there's this is a tough one to say, clairal olfaction, which is smelling things that are not in the room. I frequently, over the years, I'll smell a really strong, if I'm doing a read on someone, all of a sudden I'll stop and say, "Wow, why am I smelling lilac so much?" And the person will slap their forehead and say, "My God, I had one in my backyard when I was a kid, and I just love that smell." So that's clairolfaction. Let's smell. Sorry? Taste. Yeah. I always forget the
Latin.
There's a Latin. Yeah, the Latin. What is it? Where you literally taste something that's not there that you shouldn't be tasting.
Clairgustatorialness.
Something like that. Yeah, I always forget that last one. I should have looked at it before our podcast. But so those are all things that are correlates in the etheric to our body senses, all connected. But third eye has remote, non-physical experiences of things that are perceivable with third eye access.
Yeah, typically people think in terms of clairvoyance is the most popular one that people think of. But it seems like most people lead with clairsentience. That tends
Yeah,
to be
sure.
how it works for people. They feel something, especially women.
Yeah, I was aware as a kid. Here's a couple of good examples of how powerful this can be. I had a really good friend for a while. She was very gifted in the third eye domain, and she remembers very vividly an amazing experience she had as a kid. That had a playmate that was another girlfriend who she spent all sorts of time with, had long conversations, sat in trees to. I really respect this woman's gift. And we had long conversations. At one point, she talked to her parents. I believe, if my memory is right, when she was older, and talked about this girlfriend that she had. And the parents looked at each other, or one of the parents, I don't remember, said, "Well, that was just a
Yeah,
made up
she was like
friend."
a teenager, and she just
Yes,
said, I remember the story was she said to her parents, like, whatever happened to so and so? And her
yeah,
parents were like, that was your imaginary friend. Like, that
yeah.
person didn't exist. And she'd never realized that. Yeah.
That's how deeply she experienced clairvoyantly this
Mm-hmm.
other being. And so this was hugely disorienting for her. Bless her heart. Imagine getting the news that this person you thought was flesh and blood, it was that dense to her eyes. That's
Yeah.
how deep her gift went. And so when you clairvoyantly see things, of course, they'll, if you talk to the wrong medical authority, they'll want to slap some Thorazine on your stat.
Mm.
So a lot of third eye stuff. We could easily see how all the witch trials and all the things that happened with the Catholic Church and persecuting and killing women who were more gifted than the men in black who were wearing Catholic robes, was simply gifted women, and they were seeing things and feeling things that males, especially Catholic males of the time, couldn't sense. And so let's get rid of them. They're evil. They're dark. Here comes another whole dimension of these gifts of clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, whatever, is that many people who experience them are terrified by them.
Yeah.
Terrified because they're of unknown origin and unknown substance. They sense they're real. Sometimes they can even see the edges of them. But if your person has not been educated that this gift is neutral, that you're going to see things, it's only your emotional conditioning in some ways that causes you to contract away from the interface of
Mm-hmm.
experiencing with them. When I was a kid, I had similar, not nearly. I knew they were opaque beings. I didn't think they were real beings. I had seven little dwarfs, little gnome kind of sweet gnome
You
beings
mean
around my
opaque or
bed.
like translucent? Not
Both,
solid. Oh, okay.
not solid, opaque, translucent. Yeah, they had edges and they had features, and they were about 3 feet, 3.5 feet tall, and they were around my bed every night before I went to bed. And I asked them once, why are you there? And I would sometimes they'd be talking to me, and I would go out. I'd get up, and I couldn't go to sleep. I'd go out to my parents who were watching Jack Paar at the time, talk
Mm-hmm.
show, and said, "Hey, my friends are bothering me. Can you tell them to shut up?" And my parents would say, "Oh, you're sleepwalking here. Come
Ah.
back." And so I didn't know. I had them till they were around me perceptible till I was 12, and this was clairvoyance, and I heard them speaking to me clairaudiently, and I sensed their good nature and their care for me, clairsentience. And at 12, they said they had to leave because I had to have some room to. I was 12 years old. I started to get a little hair under my arms and elsewhere, and they said, "Well, but don't worry, we'll be back at 24." And so they left, and I spent the second half of the 12th year and the first half of the 13th year crying.
Hmm.
And my parents were very brutal with me that way. They called me Sarah Bernhardt,
Oh
which
God.
was a famous ovary motor
Yeah.
actress in the 20s. I'm telling this because of the real life impacts of this stuff. They left me, and I had an anchor since I was born, basically, since I was a kid, of a spirit, a group of spirits who were buffering me from some of the frequencies of the earth that they wanted to shield me from until I could handle them. Mm-hmm. So, and I just cried and cried and cried. And at that point, I started to man up, as it were. I was shamed by my parents, and so I manned up and went on my merry way, liking girls and going through all normal teen kind of stuff.
Repressing your emotions like a normal teen.
Like everybody does. Until 24, when I was living in a flat, and all of a sudden they came back. Mm. And I forgot that they were there until they showed up again. Only now they weren't little gnomes about my size. They were grown, tall, skinny beings, but they were the same 7 beings. And they just wanted to come back and keep their promise, and said, that's it. And of course, I knew I couldn't tell very many people about this, which is why people who have gifts like this can be made to feel crazy, because they'll repress these truths and they start choking on etherics. Then they literally, to the degree you resist them, that they will accumulate in you. Their effect will accumulate if you resist them, and they'll become more and more problematic, because what you resist persists. The same principle happens. And then they left pretty quickly after about 20 minutes of conversation. Bree and I now, again, clairaudience, clairvoyance, and clairsentience happening. There's a tribunal of 5 female souls that have been around Bree for a while, and we've consulted them 2-3 times a month. And the amazing group of yin souls, giving us some really deep and abiding kinds of guidances in some tough times that we've had. So this is all the superpower side of the coin, but you have to be emoto-spiritually balanced and secure in yourself to be able to have familiarity with such beings, because there's just not only positive beings out there. Mm-hmm. Just like here, you could bump into somebody walking down the street to the corner bodega, and that person literally is dark oriented, all out of wounding, no essential evil, but wants to do you harm or steal your money or rape you or whatever. Just like human beings, there are beings in between human incarnational lives that mean you not good. They want to frighten you. They want to get off on frightening you. They want to sometimes attach to you. And I just like to say to people out there who might have this gift and are a little freaked out by it, is that these beings have no power over you except the power of fear that you give them. They only have power to make you afraid if you are already afraid of such entities. I used to clean houses for some bank back in the day, where I would go and clean old houses of spirits. And I've told you this story before. I think I might have mentioned on the podcast. I'll say it once more. I remember all the time. I was never afraid of them, because when they were showing me hugely ugly and dismembering and bloody and gory and horrible monster faces, I wasn't frightened. I said, "Wow, you must be really suffering. Look at that look on your faces. You're grimacing and showing your snarling teeth. What's going on?" That's the way you clean houses. You don't throw white light at them. You don't say, the power of Christ compels you. You don't do any of that exorcism stuff. You simply love it away. They can't stand bandwidths of love. It's the other side of the universe. That's where all of our tales of vampires come from. And they have to go. They can't bear the sun. They've got to get back in their graves or where their crypts before dawn. It's the same principle with these entities. They just can't stand love and light. So that's the best way to clean them. But that means a gifted person can't be afraid of their gift. And so, how to deal with this is different for everyone. But in the end, when we learn how to emotionally resonate positively with these gifts, It is a gift. It's a real boon for helping people, especially who have a combination of etheric issues, third eye issues with their childhood wounding they're trying to heal. You
I've
can
always
help.
found it really funny how there are like TV shows like ghost hunters, and like they go to places to try to get a ghost on film, and like we've heard there's a ghost here, but when you open your third eye you realize there's like 10 or more times many of them than there are human beings on this planet, and
Oh
the
yeah,
discarnate spirits don't have to be looked for. They're in the room with you right now, probably 5 or
constantly.
10 of them.
There
And
were, there were two, for example, exactly right, Joseph. I'm glad you made that point. Uh, Trying to measure etheric energy is like using a microscope to look at the moon. It's the wrong tool. When 9/11 happened, there were two gifted women psychics living in New York, and they were going about their day, and all of a sudden, there were hundreds and hundreds of souls coming through their flat because beings on the other side can see when you notice them. They can
mm-hmm.
see when you notice them.
Yeah,
And so they had just been in the twin towers, and they were screaming in disorientation. They had, some people had some advanced time to deepen their terror. They knew they couldn't get down the stairs.
sure.
Several people jumped out of 90-story windows.
Yeah.
But they were just so disoriented. They were all dead now, and they were streaming into a place where they could see these others, and they were swarming around these two women psychics. And bless their hearts, they did with grace as best as they could to try to, okay, go this way, go that way. You're not in body anymore. It's all okay, but it's a big shock. So look ahead and follow the light wherever you see it. And if you see only darkness, you're looking in the wrong direction. Really good directions for these two women. They were exhausted for a couple of days after that.
Another example of this I've noticed is when there's a retail location that keeps turning over where nothing succeeds in the place. It seems like every town has one or two places like this.
Mm-hmm.
It feels, to me, they feel like energetic sinkholes, like a bowling ball and a blanket kind of thing.
Good
And they're
call.
haunted.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's just too many beings in there that don't belong. And they
Yes.
color the whole thing kind of gray, is how it looks to me, gray and heavy and smoky feeling. And
Yeah.
I always wish it's like, oh, there's another new restaurant in that place. Like I give it 6 months and then a new
Yes.
place comes in because they need to be cleaned.
Yes. Bree and I had a direct experience of this for a while on Sundays for kicks and giggles. We were, both of us are lifelong renters. We've never had enough money to ever buy a house. Uh, and we would show up at open houses and just look at what price point this house is and what price point that is, and is it worth it? Just for fun, get out on a Sunday afternoon. So we visited this one house here in town where we live, and the realtor was really friendly and really kind of open, soft kind of guy. And he said that, yeah, we can't understand it. This house should have sold a long time ago. The price point is really, it's on the low end. They'll accept even lower if it's a cash deal, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, I wonder why. So that's what he was sticking us with his spiel there,
Yeah.
as we were coming in the front door. And I immediately felt, oh, what is happening in here? And it took me about 20 minutes to walk through all the rooms of the house. It was a fairly large house, to find the room. And I felt the presence of a mother. This woman lived in this house and had lost her children in some sort of boating accident, and she was still visualizing them there, or she was waiting for them there to come home, even though she'd moved on. This was a long time ago, 50 years ago, a boating accident. And it took me a while to connect to her because she was so looking past me at the projections of her children where they should be waiting for them. And she finally noticed I felt her. And I said, wow, you're so sad. And she was shocked that
Mm.
a carnate being noticed her because she watches all the people who are coming in to buy the house, and she just ignores them. And so we had a
Well, those
long,
people feel her enough to not want to buy the house, but not
absolutely
enough to
right.
know what they're feeling. Yeah.
Exactly. So she and I had a long conversation. Bree got in on the end of it, if I remember right. And I told her that her kids were all around her in spirit, wanting her to take her focus away from this physical location to where they are now. They
Mm.
had died in a boating accident, and they were all waiting for her to. They would not reincarnate again until Mama was relieved of her horrific grief. So I was able to turn her coax her to look to her left about 22 degrees as I came up with some number. You know me in numbers that way.
Yeah.
And she saw them. And I get all teary just remembering this. And
Mm.
she was gone. There they were. She left the house. That was it. And what the realtor was watching me talking to
The realtor was there watching.
just for a moment. Then he left because he was too freaked out. So and I went down and I said, "Listen, I think I know why this house hasn't sold." And I told him I'm
Mhm.
sensitive that way, and he said, "No, no kidding. Tell me more about that." And he was really open to that.
Mhm.
He was not closed at all. And so we watched. I watched the one ad, the
To see if it would sell.
to sell, and about
Classified.
2.5 weeks later, sure enough, it
Nice.
sold.
Well, and that leads me to a question because I've done stuff like that too. And, we use the word haunted as if it's malevolent, but they're just wounded, just like people are.
Right.
Why is it seems to take so little for them to get oriented and disappear like that, go where they're supposed to go? Whereas a human being who was stuck like that would need like, a year of therapy typically. Why is it seems like so little goes so far when we do that?
Because of the lack of density. Uh,
Oh,
right? Yeah.
the conditioning isn't as thickly
No, no.
intertwined. Uh-huh.
Right. They've got more information than we would be ensconced in gravitationally dense physical bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that
That's so
sense,
interesting. Wow.
yeah, and you know what? Most of them are suffering so much, and they're so happy
Yeah.
in some ways to get someone to help them.
You got a lot of leverage.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and the deeper they can sense an authority in someone like me is confident in their gifts and compassionate at the same time, and that's a combination of competency and compassion that is got them all twisted up, and the lack of that got them all
Yeah.
twisted up in the first place.
When I first started to get the ability to see discarnate spirits, I would go to graveyards just for
Yeah,
kicks and giggles, like you said,
yes,
and would talk to the spirits that were just hanging around there stuck and, help
yeah.
them move on. And
Oh, I didn't know that, Joseph.
yeah, that's not
Oh,
something I usually talk about.
well, you're just giving more evidence to what we said earlier in the podcast about your
Mhm.
third eye gifts, right?
Well, when they first came on, it was really vivid for me, and it was like I couldn't not see them, and then I
Yeah.
managed to sort of sort it out again. But yeah, that was the main thing. I thought I was imagining it because it seemed like they needed so little to be able to have these breakthroughs. I'm like, am I just making this up?
Yeah.
But the lack of density makes sense.
Well, it's that, and the other dimension is the authority of your own soulful frequencies.
Mm,
That if you're tentative with your gifts, or you're not as an old a soul or not as gifted a soul, a lot of them will just ignore you. But you must have
hmm
had an imprimatur, as we used to say, of authority in your soulful being to make them go away that quickly. So that's good, wonderful.
Yeah, like you said, it's a whole world that people find really interesting, and what I find so fascinating again is how people do sense this stuff, and they just don't sense it enough very often to
Mhm.
be able to like work with it. And I've met
Yeah.
a number of people who, because for me, sometimes my third eye would just be, I used to hang out on the beach a lot and sunsets and play guitar and meet people, and something about that time of day, the twilight, would make me
Oh,
start to
yes.
see spirits more. And I would, just sort of for fun be like, oh, there's this guy hanging out with you with this big white beard, and he's in these old jeans. And they're like, that's mama, that sounds like my grandfather. And it's like, he's hanging out with you. And then they would start to get afraid sometimes. I've done this at least a dozen times. And I'm like, well, why are you so afraid? And they're like, well, I've always sensed those kinds of things. And they would start to relate, the fear and anxiety they had around it. And just by sitting with them and like, well, okay, there's a being, over your right shoulder. Can you sense it? And they're like, yeah. And I want it to go away. Well, hold on a second. What does it look like? And is there a smell? And we sort of do it together.
Yes.
And I would help them go further into it, like we were saying, so they're not contracting from it. And
Right.
I've helped a handful of people lose their fear of those beings entirely just by going further in, so to help them see that it means them no harm. It's very often a guide or a relative, or
Right.
not
Exactly.
usually something malicious.
Yeah. So I'd like to bookmark here that today's podcast. Look, we can talk lightly and affectionately about these kinds of domains, third eye, real domains that are not perceptible by the six human senses. And we're not being so metaphysically structured today. We're talking about
Yeah.
experiences. It's really nice to have this kind of different frequency. I'd like to complete here, and I'd like to give a few minutes of foretaste next time.
Okay.
I want to talk about, I'll talk more about it next time, but I just want to put the headlight out here that every Eastern spiritual, almost every Eastern spiritual teaching and modern physics and empiricism have long held, agree on the fact that everything is energy. Everything is energy. Because we've been talking today about basically an energetic realm that is vibrating in frequencies that our senses can't pick up, but is just as real as the chair we're sitting on. So basically, modern empiricism and modern science agrees with ancient spiritual teachings that we're just made of energy. And a subset of that is that emotions are just funny, sticky forms of thoughts, and are just energies also, just like thoughts. Just like our physical being is all made of energy, our thoughts are made of energy, and all of our emotions are made of energy. And so once we accord or go along with that, then we can use will to relate to these bad thoughts, or thoughts that you don't want to have, or these emotions you don't want to have. And we can choose our way out of experiencing them or thinking them. And this is all based on an idea that I am energy, therefore I am. Everything is energy. I am energy, therefore I am. And identity is firmly planted on a very different assumption that there is something upstream of energy, that energy is made of, that we can't map with any microscope, electron microscope in that sense, or anything they measure now, electromagnetic measurements of quantum foam, for example. Upstream of all forms of energy is something divine that we call, identity calls Ichor, Eichor. I borrowed it from the Old Norse legends of the ichor of the gods, the blood of the gods, Ichor. I just added an E on the front of it for emotion. So I want to talk more about ichor, because when we're talking about chakras and creation relational interventions, we're talking about being able to access and utilize ichor. You know how to do it. That's upstream of energy, meaning it can make operations on dissonant energies that energy itself can't unwork. In other words, you need something out of, if you got like Einstein said, in this domain, you can't solve a problem in the same domain it was created. Energy itself can't really unblock problems with energy. They're too much a part of it. You've got to get outside it and reach in to get underneath the energetic patterns and learning to access I-Core can do that. So I want to talk about how we're not made of energy. We're made of I-Core, where it comes from, and how it informs the whole paradigm of identity next time.
Wonderful. Okay. Look forward to that.
And here's the moment where I wish we had some call-ins. Hey, I had this experience.
Yes, we're good. Yes, caller. Yes, Bob from Mississippi. You're on with us now.
Yeah. I keep seeing this wonderful house and plantation that we live on. We don't grow cotton anymore. My family did, but I'm bothered every night by these beings at night that scare me. And well. And
then we would talk about that for 5 minutes, and Bob would thank us for the help, and then we'd really be the metaphysical car talk.
Exactly.
That would be okay. Fun. We can do that at some point. Yeah. Yes. There's web apps where we could. There's I think it's Stitcher. I forget. There's a way we could be recording live and take in chat questions, and so if listeners, that's what you want, tell me, because we respond to interest. But I'm not going to do it just to. I'm not going to do it unless it's called for. So call for it if that's what you want. We could do this with live people, with a live audience. There's technology for that.
Oh, maybe that's our next iteration of our podcasts, or not to replace, but to add on, where every third podcast we have an open-ended one like that, sure. Where people could ask questions about the last 3 podcasts. So, but yeah, I'm right with you. Out there, if you find this series interesting, challenging, and you want to be able to be part of it, write Joseph, drive him crazy, and we'll get the technology together to be able to do it.
Sure, yeah, no problem. Okay, thank you, Stace, and we'll tune in next time for the completion of creation-relationality.
Probably, I think we'll do a third one. We'll take care of, because we're going backwards from expressions to forms. Now we'll go to essences, and that's I-Core. Okay. So, all right.
Until then, thanks for listening.
You bet. Thanks, Joseph.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Soul podcast. To learn more about Stace Barron and Identity, please visit identity.org. To learn more about Joseph Shapiro, visit clearandopen.com. Until next time, we wish you well on your journey.